The courtroom was silent, but the silence was heavy, like a thick fog pressing down on everyone inside. Marcus Reed sat in the defendant's chair, his hands clenched lightly in his lap. He could feel the eyes of the entire room on him. Some were curious, some were angry, and some were full of pity. But Marcus's gaze was steady. He knew he had done nothing wrong, yet the weight of the accusation hung over him like a storm cloud. The judge, Alan Crow, was a tall man with a sharp face and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He had a reputation for being strict, unyielding, and unafraid to hand down harsh sentences. Today, he looked down at Marcus as if the young man were already guilty in his mind. Marcus swallowed hard. He could hear his mother's soft sobs from the back of the room, her hand gripping the edge of her scarf. Her love was strong, but she was helpless. "Mr. Reed," Judge Crow began, his voice cold and steady, "you have been found guilty of armed robbery and murder in the first degree. Considering the severity of your crimes, I have no choice but to sentence you to death." The gavel struck with a sharp bang, and the sound echoed through the room like a hammer against steel. Marcus's heart sank, but he refused to show fear. The courtroom erupted in gasps, murmurs, and whispers. His mother's cries grew louder, and even some of the spectators could not hide their shock. "Your Honor," Marcus said calmly, his voice quiet but firm, "I am innocent. You are making a mistake." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Reed, this court has examined the evidence. Witnesses have testified. The jury has made its decision. Your claims of innocence are noted, but they do not change the outcome." Marcus nodded slightly, as if he had expected this. He looked around at the people in the courtroom. Some avoided his gaze. Some stared at him with pity. He noticed the prosecutor shifting nervously in his seat, and for a brief moment, Marcus thought he saw doubt in his eyes. But it was fleeting. He turned his gaze back to the judge. There was no fear there, only determination. Marcus had always believed that the truth had a way of coming out, even in the darkest moments. He had been trained to stay calm, to think clearly, and to act when the time was right. He had waited his whole life for this moment, though he hadn't known it until now. The bailiffs approached him, ready to take him away. Marcus rose slowly from his seat. His movements were measured, deliberate. Every step he took echoed against the polished wood floor of the courtroom. He could feel the tension rising with every second. The people watching seemed to lean forward, their attention fixed on him. "Don't do this, son," his mother whispered, tears streaming down her face. But Marcus only shook his head gently. "I have to," he said softly. "Trust me." The judge, sensing a change in the air, frowned. Something about Marcus's calmness unsettled him. It was not the fear he expected from a man facing death. There was no panic, no begging, only quiet strength. Judge Crow had sentenced countless men and women over the years. Most had pleaded, cried, or shouted. Few had met the end with composure like Marcus. As the bailiffs reached for him, Marcus turned slowly to face the judge. His eyes were sharp, full of focus. In that moment, he was not the accused. He was something more, something no one in the room could yet understand. "Your Honor," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly through the courtroom, "you think you have won, but you don't know the full story. Soon everyone will." The judge's hand tightened around his gavel. He didn't like the tone. It sounded like a challenge. Marcus's calm confidence was unnerving. He had expected to see fear, despair, maybe even anger. But not this. Not calmness that carried the weight of certainty. The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder. Spectators exchanged confused glances. Some wondered if Marcus had some trick up his sleeve. Others whispered prayers. For him, even the jury members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Marcus's mother clutched his hand for a brief moment before letting go, knowing that whatever was about to happen, he had to face it alone. She watched him as he stood tall, his posture, strong despite the circumstances. There was something about him that seemed untouchable, something about him that spoke of hidden strength. The bailiffs hesitated. The courtroom felt like it had stopped moving, time itself frozen for a few heartbeats. Marcus's calmness, his unwavering gaze, had created a strange tension that even the judge could not break. He took one last look at his mother, gave a small, reassuring nod, and then turned his attention back to Judge Crow. "You've made your decision," Marcus said quietly, "but the truth will come out, and when it does, everyone will see what really happened here." The judge's face grew, red with anger. He banged his gavel again, but this time the sound seemed hollow. The courtroom held its collective breath. Marcus's words had struck a chord, and even those who were unsure what he meant felt the weight of them. The bailiffs finally moved forward, but Marcus did not resist. He walked calmly toward them, yet every step seemed purposeful, controlled. He was ready for whatever came next, and in that quiet, tense moment, Marcus Reed was more than a defendant. He was a storm waiting to break, and no one in the courtroom could yet see how quickly the tables were about to turn. Even the judge, who had spent years commanding fear and respect, felt a shiver of unease. There was something in Marcus's eyes, something that spoke of knowledge, skill, and a plan that no one could imagine. The gavel, the courtroom, the sentence, none of it mattered anymore. The game had changed, and Marcus was already 5 steps ahead. Outside the courtroom doors, the world seemed unaware of the storm that was about to unfold inside. But Marcus Reed knew. He had waited for this moment all his life, and now, finally, it had arrived. The verdict had been delivered, but the real justice was only beginning. The heavy oak doors of the courtroom were still swinging from the commotion when a sharp sound echoed from the hallway outside. Marcus Reed had been led just a few steps by the bailiffs when everything changed. In one instant, the air seemed to shift, charged with an energy no one could explain. The people in the courtroom turned their heads, trying to see what had caused the sudden interruption. Before anyone could react, a group of men in dark suits stormed into the room. Their movements were quick and precise, trained. They were federal agents, and each carried a badge that flashed in the bright lights of the courtroom. "Step away from the defendant!" one of them shouted. The bailiffs froze mid-step, caught off guard by the unexpected command. Marcus's heart stayed calm, his eyes scanning the room with precision. This had been the plan all along, though. No one else could have known it. He had played his part, endured the fear, and now it was time to act. He had waited for the right moment, and this was it. The lead agent approached him and handed him something. A shiny badge, the symbol of authority. That instantly changed everything. Marcus held it up, letting the courtroom see. Gasps filled the room once again, this time mixed with disbelief. Some faces turned pale, some wide-eyed with confusion. The man who had moments ago been a condemned criminal was now, in the eyes of the law, an agent himself. Marcus took a deep breath, letting the moment sink in. "Your Honor," he said, his voice steady, calm, and clear, "you believe you have won. But the truth is far from what you see here. You have broken the law, and today, justice will be served." The judge, Alan Crow, froze. His mouth opened, then closed, as if the words he wanted to speak were caught in his throat. He had sentenced countless people over the years. He had stood at the bench demanding obedience, respect, and fear. But now, standing before him was a man he had condemned, holding the authority to arrest him. The reality was almost too much to process. The courtroom was in chaos. Spectators whispered rapidly, jurors exchanged nervous glances, and Marcus's mother sat frozen, hope battling with disbelief in her heart. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. Her son, the man she had feared losing, was not only alive, but in control. Tears blurred her vision as she watched Marcus take command of the situation with quiet confidence. Marcus moved toward the judge, each step deliberate. The courtroom seemed to shrink around him as the tension built. He was no longer a defendant. He was a marshal, a man who had endured injustice and was now empowered to set it right. The entire room felt the shift. Fear, shock, and awe combined in a powerful current that none could ignore. "Judge Crow," Marcus said, standing a few feet from the bench, his eyes locked onto the judge's. "You have been involved in bribery, falsifying evidence and framing innocent men for crimes they did not commit. You have abused your position of power. Today, that ends." The judge's face turned red, his hands trembling slightly on the bench. He had faced resistance before, but never like this. The calm, unwavering authority in Marcus's voice was different. It carried certainty, knowledge, and the weight of truth. The judge realized, perhaps too late, that he had miscalculated. He had judged the wrong man. The lead agent stepped forward, gesturing for the judge to stand. "Judge Alan Crow, you are under arrest for corruption, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The gavel that had just sentenced Marcus felt meaningless now. The very room that had witnessed the condemnation was now witnessing the reversal. Crowds of people whispered, some clapped quietly, and others shook their heads in disbelief. The powerful had been humbled, and the innocent had risen. Marcus watched carefully as the judge tried to protest, his voice shaking with anger and fear. "You don't understand. I am the law here. You can't just—" "You abused the law," Marcus interrupted, his tone firm but calm. "You believed your power would protect you. It won't. Not today, not ever." The bailiffs who had once escorted Marcus now hesitated, unsure of what to do. Some lowered their heads in embarrassment, realizing they had followed the wrong orders. Others simply stepped aside, letting justice take its rightful course. The spectators leaned forward, eyes wide, as the scene unfolded like a drama they could hardly believe. Marcus's mother finally stood, tears running freely down her cheeks. She could hardly breathe, but her heart swelled with pride and relief. The son she had feared losing was alive, strong, and fighting for justice in a way she had never imagined. Her hands clasped together, she whispered prayers of gratitude, thanking every force she could think of that her son had been prepared, trained, and brave. The judge was finally handcuffed, the agents leading him away from the bench. The sound of his protests faded into the distance as Marcus's calm authority dominated the courtroom. What had once been a place of fear and despair was now filled with awe, hope, and a sense of order restored. Marcus turned toward the crowd, allowing himself a small nod to those who had supported him silently, those who had believed in justice. Then he looked at his mother, who met his gaze with a mixture of love, relief, and pride. He had promised her he would come home, and he had kept that promise, though it had required courage, patience, and precision beyond measure. As the courtroom slowly returned to a hushed calm, Marcus realized that the day was far from over. This was just the beginning. There would be questions, investigations, and consequences for the judge and those who had aided him. But for now, Marcus had won the first battle. The tables had turned, and justice had begun its rightful course. Outside, the sunlight streamed through the large windows, bathing the courtroom in warmth. Marcus could feel the weight lifting from his shoulders, though he knew his mission was far from complete. He had faced death, endured injustice, and emerged stronger, more focused than ever. And as he stood there, the badge glinting in his hand, he knew that the truth had the power to change everything. The judge had ruled the courtroom, but Marcus had ruled the truth, and that truth was unstoppable. The courtroom was still buzzing with whispers and quiet gasps when Marcus Reed finally lowered his badge. The judge, Alan Crow, had been escorted out in handcuffs, but the tension in the room had not yet dissolved. Marcus could feel it, the lingering unease that comes when people witness a power they never expected. He stood tall, letting the calm in his presence settle the murmurs slowly. For a moment, it seemed as if everyone was holding their breath. Some of the spectators were still in shock, unable to believe what they had just seen. Jurors, court staff, and onlookers all stared at Marcus with a mixture of awe, confusion, and relief. His mother wiped her tears, holding on to hope that had once seemed impossible. But Marcus knew this was only the beginning. The arrest of the judge was just the surface. Beneath it lay a web of corruption, lies, and deceit that had ensnared countless innocent people. Marcus had uncovered it piece by piece, and now he needed to ensure it would be dismantled completely. He turned to the lead agent, a tall woman with sharp eyes who had been coordinating the federal team. "We need to secure all the files from the judge's chambers immediately," Marcus said, his voice firm but calm. "Anything connected to his cases, his personal records, and any communications with outside parties. We can't leave a single piece of evidence behind." The agent nodded, signaling her team. They moved quickly and efficiently, a blur of motion, as they started securing documents, electronic devices, and any other items that could hold evidence. Marcus walked through the courtroom, observing, analyzing, and planning his next moves. Every detail mattered. Every action could have consequences. Meanwhile, the murmurs among the crowd grew louder. Some spectators had begun whispering questions, but no one dared approach Marcus directly. His presence was commanding, but not intimidating. It was a calm authority that made people feel both safe and aware that things were serious. A reporter, clearly emboldened by the chaos, raised a hand and asked, "Mr. Reed, are you saying the judge was corrupt? What does this mean for everyone he sentenced?" Marcus looked directly at the reporter, his gaze steady. "It means that the truth will come out. Everyone who was wrongly accused will have a chance at justice, and no one, no matter their position, is above the law." The reporter scribbled furiously in her notebook, clearly stunned by Marcus's words. The story was already bigger than any headline she had imagined. In that moment, Marcus realized that the reach of this case would be enormous. Public attention would make it impossible for the authorities to ignore what had happened. As the agents worked, Marcus's mind turned to the bigger picture. He knew that there were others who had helped cover the judge's crimes. Bribes, hidden files, false testimonies, all of it had to be uncovered. And that meant he needed to act fast. Corruption, once exposed, often led to desperate moves by those trying to protect themselves. He couldn't allow anyone to slip through the cracks. "Marcus," one agent said quietly, "we've secured everything we could from the chambers. There's a lot, but it's all organized and ready for processing." Marcus nodded, his jaw tight with focus. "Good. Make sure nothing leaves this building without my approval. I want every piece of evidence verified, cross-checked, and protected. If anyone tries to tamper with it, we need to be ready." The courtroom was starting to empty, the tension slowly releasing as people realized the danger had passed. Some clapped quietly, some shook their heads, still trying to process the scene they had witnessed. Marcus's mother approached him cautiously, her eyes filled with both relief and concern. "You were amazing, Marcus," she said softly. "But are you sure it's over?" Marcus shook his head. "Not yet, Mom. This was only the first step. The judge was part of a much bigger system. If we want real justice, we have to go deeper." Her hands trembled slightly as she held his. I can't lose you. Please be careful." Marcus smiled faintly, a calm reassurance that masked the intensity of his thoughts. "I will be. But we can't stop now. Too many people's lives depend on this." He turned back to the agents and the staff who were helping organize the evidence. "We need to review all the judge's cases, identify anyone who was wrongly convicted, prepare for appeals, And alert the federal court system. This is going to take coordination, precision, and speed. The lead agent nodded again. Understood. We'll get started immediately. As the team moved into action, Marcus's mind wandered briefly to the faces of those he had seen in the courtroom, families who had lost loved ones, people who had been convicted unfairly, and those who had suffered because of a corrupt system. Each story added fuel to his determination. He had faced death moments ago, yet he was more focused than ever. Every injustice he could correct was a step toward balance, truth, and fairness. Outside the courtroom, a few photographers and reporters were starting to gather. Marcus knew the media attention would be intense. Every move, every word, every action would be scrutinized. But he didn't mind. The truth needed to be visible. The public needed to understand that corruption could be stopped, and that no one, not even a powerful judge, was untouchable. The judge's office had been cleared, files organized, and the agents were preparing to transport the evidence to a secure federal location. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He had already endured fear, false accusations, and the threat of death. Now he faced a new challenge, uncovering the full extent of the corruption and ensuring justice for those affected. Despite the pressure, Marcus felt a quiet satisfaction. He had proven something to himself, to his mother, and to the world. Courage, determination, and intelligence could overcome even the darkest moments. But he also knew that this was not a victory yet. The battle was far from over. As he stood in the now emptying courtroom, Marcus glanced toward the exit. Somewhere beyond those doors were the next steps of his mission. Investigations, interrogations, and decisions that would shape the lives of countless people. He would face obstacles, resistance, and perhaps even danger. But he was ready. He had been prepared his entire life for this moment. The courtroom that had once condemned him was now a symbol of change. Marcus Reed had survived, but more importantly, he had taken the first step toward true justice. And as he walked out of the room, flanked by agents, he knew that the fight was only beginning, and that he was ready for whatever came next. The sun had barely begun to rise when Marcus Reed arrived at the federal headquarters. The building's tall glass walls reflected the soft morning light, but inside, the atmosphere was tense and urgent. Marcus moved quickly through the hallways, his mind focused on the task ahead. Today was not just about the judge. It was about the system that allowed him to act with impunity, the corruption that had destroyed innocent lives, and the chance to restore justice. The agents who had escorted him from the courtroom were already at work, organizing the evidence, cross-referencing files, and preparing digital records. Marcus joined them, leaning over a table covered in folders and electronic devices. Every file represented a life affected, a truth hidden, or a crime ignored. His fingers brushed over the documents, and he could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. "This is bigger than I thought," one of the agents said quietly, looking at Marcus. "Some of these cases, the judge didn't just bend the law, he broke it completely. Innocent people went to prison, and some lives were ruined forever." Marcus nodded slowly. "I know, and we're going to fix as many as we can. We need to identify everyone who was wrongly convicted, cross-check the evidence, and make sure their appeals move forward immediately. Time is critical. Some of these people have been waiting for years." As he spoke, Marcus's mind flashed back to the courtroom. The fear, the tension, the moment when he had stood calm in the face of death, it all came rushing back. But that fear had been replaced by resolve. He had survived, and now he had the power to make a real difference. The lead agent, a woman named Rebecca Torres, approached him with a tablet in her hand. "Marcus, we've identified several cases that are high priority. These individuals were convicted under suspicious circumstances, and the files contain irregularities in the evidence. If we act quickly, we can prevent further injustice. Marcus took the tablet, scanning the names and details. Each case was a story, a person whose life had been unfairly controlled by a corrupt system. He felt a surge of determination. We start with these. Make sure their lawyers are informed and ready. We need hearings set up immediately, no delays. They deserve justice now. As the agents moved to carry out his instructions, Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and saw a message from an unknown number. Be careful. Some people in the judge's network know you're coming. His heart skipped a beat, but he didn't panic. Danger was part of this job, part of the mission. He had faced death before and survived. He could face this too. Marcus knew that exposing corruption meant enemies would rise. The judge had not acted alone. There were others who had benefited from his crimes, people who might try to silence anyone who threatened their power. But he was ready. Every step he took had been calculated, and every move would be deliberate. He would not allow fear to control him. Hours passed as the team worked tirelessly. Files were sorted, evidence was verified, and legal notices were prepared. Marcus moved among the agents, giving instructions, reviewing details, and ensuring nothing was overlooked. He felt a strange sense of calm amid the chaos. This was where he belonged, fighting for truth, protecting the innocent, and bringing accountability to those who had abused their power. Around midday, Marcus received a call from one of the lawyers assigned to the high-priority cases. Marcus, we've started reviewing the files. Some of the evidence is shocking. The judge manipulated witnesses, altered documents, and even coerced confessions. We've never seen anything like this. Marcus ran his hand over his face, the weight of the reality settling in. I know. That's why we have to act quickly. Keep me updated on every development. I want progress reports every hour. The day stretched on, filled with the sounds of typing, phone calls, and quiet discussions. Marcus barely noticed the passage of time. Every case he reviewed, every file he read, fueled his determination. He knew that the people affected had suffered for too long. Each moment wasted was another moment of injustice. Late in the afternoon, Marcus took a brief pause. He leaned against the table, looking out the large windows at the city below. The streets bustled with life, unaware of the drama unfolding in the federal headquarters. He thought about the families whose lives had been disrupted, the innocent people who had faced prison or worse, and the relief that would come when justice was restored. Rebecca Torres approached him again, her expression serious. Marcus, we've traced connections between the judge and several other officials. They've been part of a network protecting each other, covering up crimes, and ensuring that no one questioned them. This goes higher than we imagined. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Then we take it higher. We follow the chain, expose every link, and make sure no one is safe from accountability. Corruption dies when the truth is visible. As evening approached, the team had made significant progress. Files were organized, preliminary hearings were scheduled, and notifications were sent to the courts and lawyers. Marcus felt a sense of accomplishment, but also knew the hardest work was still ahead. This was only the beginning of a long battle against a powerful hidden system. He glanced at his mother, who had come to the headquarters after hearing the news. She watched him quietly, pride and concern mingling in her eyes. Marcus, you've done so much already, she said softly. Are you sure you can handle all of this? Marcus smiled faintly, a calm confidence that reassured her. I have to, for the people who were wrongly convicted, for everyone who's been hurt by this system. I can't stop now, Mom, not until every injustice is addressed. As night fell, Marcus stayed at the headquarters, reviewing the remaining files, planning his next steps, and coordinating with agents. He knew that there would be resistance, threats, and unexpected challenges. But he was prepared. Every moment of fear he had faced in the courtroom had taught him one thing: courage, patience, and determination could overcome any obstacle. By the time he finally leaned back in his chair, exhausted but focused, Marcus knew one thing for certain. The battle for justice was far from over, but he had already taken the first critical steps. The judge's fall had been only the beginning. The real fight was just starting, and Marcus Reed was ready for it. The corruption network was strong, but truth was stronger. And Marcus would make sure that every hidden crime, every abused power, and every innocent life wronged would be brought into the light. The night air was thick with tension as Marcus Reed stepped into the secure operations room of the federal headquarters. Multiple screens lined the walls, displaying case files, maps, and ongoing investigations. Agents worked quickly, cross-referencing documents, tracking connections, and preparing for what Marcus knew would be the most dangerous part of his mission: confronting the rest of the corrupt network. Marcus moved among them, observing every detail, making decisions, and anticipating problems before they happened. His eyes scanned the files spread across the tables. The corruption ran deeper than he had imagined. Officials, lawyers, even law enforcement officers had been involved. Each name he read made his jaw tighten. Innocent lives had been destroyed, families shattered. And for what? Power, greed, control. Rebecca Torres approached him, her expression serious. "Marcus, we've identified the top targets. These are the people who were most involved in covering for Judge Crow. They have influence and resources. Some may try to fight back." Marcus nodded, his mind already calculating strategies. "We need to move carefully. Any wrong step could alert them. We'll proceed quietly but decisively. Our priority is to secure evidence, prevent escapes, and ensure no one is harmed unnecessarily." Hours passed as the team coordinated their next moves. Marcus reviewed communications, traced financial transactions, and studied each suspect's patterns. The deeper he dug, the more he realized how many lives had been affected. His chest tightened at the thought of those who had suffered while the corrupt operated freely. Then, just as he was reviewing a particularly troubling case, his phone buzzed with an urgent message from one of the field agents. "Marcus, we have a problem. One of the targets knows we're coming. They're preparing to resist. Be careful." Marcus's eyes narrowed. He had expected resistance, but this was the first direct warning. He quickly gathered his team. "Listen carefully. This is the turning point. We cannot afford mistakes. Everyone must follow the plan exactly. We're going in at dawn. Our goal is to apprehend them all and secure evidence without unnecessary conflict. But we must be prepared for anything." The night passed in tense preparation. Marcus barely slept, reviewing files and running through possible scenarios in his mind. Every detail mattered. Every decision could mean the difference between success and failure. He knew that at this stage, courage alone would not be enough. He needed strategy, precision, and the trust of everyone working with him. Finally, dawn broke. The first rays of sunlight reflected off the federal building, signaling the start of a critical day. Marcus and his team moved out, carefully coordinating, with other agents stationed throughout the city. Vehicles rolled quietly through the streets, officers communicating through encrypted radios. Marcus remained calm, but inside, his mind raced with possibilities. Their first target was a high-ranking official who had aided the judge in covering false evidence. As they approached the location, Marcus signaled the team to spread out and secure exits. "No surprises," he said quietly, his voice firm. "We move in quickly and decisively. Everyone follows protocol." The operation began smoothly. Agents entered the building, and the suspect was apprehended without resistance. Marcus carefully examined the documents in the office, ensuring nothing had been destroyed or hidden. The evidence confirmed the depth of the corruption and linked the official directly to multiple wrongful convictions. But the next target was different. This one had been tipped off, and Marcus sensed danger before they even arrived. As their team approached, a trap was triggered, alarms blared, and several men blocked their path, armed and ready. Marcus's heart raced, but his face remained calm. He had trained for situations like this, and now was the moment to act. "Stay calm," Marcus instructed the agents. "Follow my lead. We can handle this." Using careful movements, strategic positioning, and clear commands, Marcus directed the team. They moved like a well-oiled machine, securing exits, disarming threats, and ensuring no civilian was harmed. The tension was unbearable, each second stretching as if time itself had slowed. Marcus's mind remained sharp, calculating the safest and most effective actions. In the midst of the chaos, Marcus noticed the suspect trying to escape through a side door. Without hesitation, he sprinted after him, weaving through obstacles and cornered the man against a wall. "It's over," Marcus said, his voice steady. "There's no way out. You've had your chance, and now justice catches up to you." The man struggled, but Marcus's calm authority and physical presence left him no choice. He was apprehended, and the team secured additional evidence linking him to the judge and other corrupt officials. Marcus breathed a quiet sigh of relief. They had survived the first real threat, but he knew there would be more challenges ahead. Back at headquarters, Marcus reviewed the evidence collected. Each file, each document, each confession added to the growing web of accountability. The corruption was being dismantled piece by piece, but Marcus also knew the network ran deep. Higher-ranking officials would not go down easily. They might try to intimidate, bribe, or even harm anyone interfering with their power. He looked around at his team, their faces tired but resolute. "We've made progress," he said, "but we cannot stop now. This is the turning point. We have to push forward carefully but relentlessly. Every person we bring to justice, every piece of evidence we secure, is another step toward restoring truth and fairness." Marcus's mother, who had been waiting for updates at headquarters, arrived just in time to see him in the operations room. Her eyes reflected both pride and worry. "Marcus, this is dangerous," she said softly. "Promise me you'll be careful." Marcus smiled, a quiet reassurance. "I promise, but I can't turn back now. Too many people are counting on me. We're so close to making things right." Even as night fell again, Marcus continued to coordinate the operations. He knew the turning point had arrived, the moment where courage, strategy, and determination would be tested like never before. He had faced death before, endured injustice, and survived. Now, he would face the resistance of a powerful network determined to protect itself, and Marcus Reed was ready. The morning sun broke over the city with a golden glow, but inside the federal headquarters, Marcus Reed felt no warmth. The tension in the operations room was electric. Today would decide everything, the culmination of weeks of careful planning, investigations, and dangerous maneuvers. Marcus walked past rows of agents, their faces determined but clearly exhausted. They had worked tirelessly, gathering evidence, making arrests, and preparing for the final confrontations. Marcus stopped in front of a large digital map that displayed the locations of the remaining high-ranking corrupt officials. Each red dot marked a target who had shielded Judge Crow and perpetuated injustice. He studied the map carefully, tracing lines between the officials, their offices, and other points of influence. This was the moment of truth. Every move had to be precise, every decision critical. Rebecca Torres, his lead agent, approached him with a folder in hand. "Marcus, we've confirmed that several key officials are in the same building downtown. They're heavily guarded, but the evidence we have is enough to secure convictions if we apprehend them." Marcus nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Good. We move in swiftly and efficiently. No mistakes. Every agent must follow protocol. Our priority is securing evidence and arrests, but we must also prevent unnecessary harm. These people have harmed countless innocents, but we are not here to act like them. As the team prepared, Marcus felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. His mind raced, but his movements were calm and deliberate. He had faced life-or-death situations before, and he knew that fear could not control him. Courage and focus would. The team moved out quietly, traveling in unmarked vehicles to the building downtown. Marcus remained in constant communication, with agents stationed around the perimeter. Every entry point was secured, every possible escape route monitored. The operation had to be flawless. The stakes were too high for errors. Upon reaching the building, Marcus signaled the team to take their positions. They spread out strategically, moving silently toward the entrances. Through encrypted radios, he gave precise instructions. On my signal, move in. Protect civilians, secure evidence, apprehend targets. No unnecessary confrontations. Remember, precision is our strength. Then, the moment came. Marcus gave the signal. Agents moved swiftly, entering the building from multiple points. The targets were caught off guard, unable to react quickly enough. In a matter of minutes, several key officials were apprehended. Their shocked expressions betrayed their disbelief. They had never expected justice to arrive in such an organized and unstoppable force. But the final target, the most dangerous of all, was not so easily cornered. This person had been tipped off and was ready to resist. As Marcus approached the office, he noticed the tension in the air. 2 armed guards blocked the doorway, their weapons drawn. Marcus's heart raced, but his face remained calm, his voice steady. "Step aside," Marcus said, his tone commanding. "This is your chance to surrender peacefully." The guards hesitated, but the other agents were already surrounding the room, leaving them no room to maneuver. The standoff lasted only seconds, but it felt like hours. Marcus calculated every movement, every possibility. Then, with a precise command, he signaled the agents to advance. The room erupted in action. Guards were disarmed, restrained, and secured without any injuries. The target, realizing resistance was futile, raised their hands. Marcus stepped forward, maintaining control of the situation. "It's over," he said. "You have been caught. The truth will be revealed, and justice will be served." As the agents secured the evidence, Marcus carefully examined the files and digital records. Every connection, every hidden transaction, every manipulated case was documented. The corrupt network that had operated in shadows for years was now exposed, powerless, and accountable. Back at headquarters, the team began processing the arrests. Files were duplicated, evidence secured, and reports sent to the courts. Marcus coordinated with lawyers, judges, and law enforcement to ensure that the arrests would lead to actual justice for the victims. This was the culmination of all their planning, the moment when truth overpowered deceit. Marcus's mother arrived at headquarters again, her hands shaking slightly as she approached him. "Marcus," she said softly, "you've done it, but it was dangerous. I was so afraid." Marcus smiled faintly, exhausted but triumphant. "I know, Mom, but it had to be done. So many lives depended on this. So many people have been wronged for too long. Today, that ends." As the day progressed, news outlets began reporting the arrests. The public reaction was immediate: shock, anger, but also relief. People who had once felt powerless saw that justice could prevail. Families of those wrongfully convicted began contacting authorities, hoping that their loved ones could finally find freedom. Marcus knew this was just the beginning, but it was a start. By evening, Marcus stood alone in the operations room for a brief moment, looking out the large windows at the city below. The sun was setting, casting golden light over the streets. He felt a sense of calm he hadn't experienced since the ordeal began. The corruption network had been dismantled, the judge was in custody, and countless lives were on the path to justice. But Marcus also knew this victory required vigilance. The system he had fought to protect was fragile, and others might try to exploit it in the future. He had faced death, injustice, and resistance, and survived. He had proven that courage, intelligence, and determination could overcome even the most powerful opponents. Rebecca Torres entered the room, her face tired but satisfied. "Marcus, it's done. The operation was a success. Every target has been apprehended and the evidence is secure. Justice is being restored." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of relief mixed with the burden of responsibility. "Good work," he said. "But we must remain vigilant. This is a victory, yes, but the real work, ensuring the system remains fair, continues." His mother joined him once more, holding his hand tightly. "I can finally breathe," she said softly, tears glistening in her eyes. "You've saved so many lives." Marcus smiled, looking at the city one last time before turning back to the room filled with dedicated agents. "We've done something important today. But the fight for truth and justice never truly ends. We will remain ready, vigilant, and committed. This is what it means to protect the innocent and serve the law." As night fell completely over the city, Marcus felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The turning point had come, the danger had been faced, and justice had prevailed. The corrupt network had fallen, and truth had triumphed over deceit. For Marcus Reed, the mission was far from over, but the most critical battle had been won. The city was quiet in the early morning, the streets bathed in a soft golden light. Marcus Reed stood at the edge of a rooftop looking out over the skyline. The past weeks had been the most challenging of his life, but now, for the first time, he allowed himself a moment of reflection. The corrupt network was dismantled, the judge and his accomplices were in custody, and countless lives were beginning to heal. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the cool breeze on his face. The weight of responsibility had been heavy, but he had carried it. He thought about all the innocent people who had suffered under false accusations, families torn apart, and dreams delayed or destroyed. Justice had been long overdue, and now, slowly, it was being restored. His mother's words from the previous night echoed in his mind. "You've saved so many lives." Marcus knew she was right, but he also knew that saving lives was not just about fighting corruption. It was about restoring hope, trust, and dignity to those who had been wronged, and that was the true reward of his work. Back at the federal headquarters, agents were still busy processing evidence, filing reports, and ensuring that the legal system was prepared to deliver fair trials. Marcus walked through the operations room, nodding to each team member. Their faces were tired, but filled with pride. They had worked together tirelessly, facing danger and uncertainty, and they had emerged victorious. Rebecca Torres approached him, holding a stack of reports. "Marcus, everything is documented. We've prepared files for appeals and lawyers are contacting those who were wrongly convicted. The courts are ready to act as soon as possible." Marcus smiled faintly. "Good work, Rebecca. Make sure every case is followed up. We can't allow any mistakes now. These people have waited long enough for justice." As he moved toward the briefing room, Marcus's thoughts returned to the courtroom, the place where his nightmare had begun. He remembered the fear he had felt, the uncertainty, the moment when Judge Crow had sentenced him unjustly. But he also remembered the courage that had carried him through, the calm determination that had allowed him to turn the tables, and the unwavering support of those who believed in him. The courtroom, once a symbol of injustice, had become a symbol of hope. Marcus knew that the ripple effects of his actions would be felt for years. Wrongfully convicted individuals would finally have the chance to reclaim their lives, and the corrupt officials who had hidden behind power and authority were now exposed. Truth had prevailed, and justice had been restored. Later that afternoon, Marcus visited one of the families affected by Judge Crow's corruption. A young man, Daniel, had spent 5 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. When Marcus arrived, Daniel's parents embraced him, tears streaming down their faces. "Thank you," Daniel's father said, voice choked with emotion. "You've given our son back to us. You've restored our lives." Marcus placed a reassuring hand on the young man's shoulder. "Daniel, the truth matters. No one should suffer because of lies or corruption. Today, you have your life back. Use it wisely and never forget that justice can prevail." Daniel nodded, tears in his eyes, as if he could hardly believe that his nightmare had finally ended. Marcus stayed with the family for a while, sharing stories, offering comfort, and listening to their hopes for the future. Every face he saw, every person he helped, reinforced his belief in the importance of his mission. That evening, Marcus returned home to his mother. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that felt peaceful rather than empty. She had prepared a simple meal, but neither of them was hungry. Instead, they sat together, talking about everything that had happened, the challenges they had faced, and the victories they had achieved. "Marcus," she said softly, "you've done something incredible. But remember, you are more than this. Fight. You've saved lives, but you also need to live your life. Don't let the weight of the world rest only on your shoulders." Marcus nodded, feeling the truth of her words. He had been so focused on justice that he had almost forgotten himself. "I know, Mom, but seeing the difference we've made, it's worth everything. I'll take care of myself, I promise. But I can't stop now. There's still work to be done to make sure this system remains fair." Days passed, and Marcus continued to monitor the aftermath of the operation. Appeals were filed, trials began, and the media covered the story extensively. Public awareness of corruption in the judicial system grew, and people were inspired to stand up for truth and fairness. Marcus's actions had sparked change far beyond what he had imagined. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Marcus returned to the rooftop where he often found clarity. The city lights twinkled like stars, reflecting the lives he had touched and the justice he had helped restore. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself a deep breath of relief. He thought about the journey, the fear, the danger, the victories, and the losses. Every step had tested him, but he had endured, survived, and emerged stronger. The experience had changed him, shaped him into someone who understood the power of truth and the importance of courage. Marcus's phone buzzed with a message from Rebecca. "All high-priority cases are moving forward. Justice is being served." He smiled, knowing that the work would continue, but also that the most critical battles had been won. Turning back to the city, Marcus felt a sense of peace. The mission had been dangerous, the stakes had been high, and the challenges had seemed insurmountable. Yet through determination, courage, and the support of those who believed in him, he had prevailed. Marcus Reed had faced death, injustice, and corruption, and he had won. The city, the innocent, and the truth itself owed him a debt that could never be measured. And as he stood there, watching the world continue below, he knew one thing for certain. Justice was not just a goal, it was a responsibility. And he was ready to carry that responsibility for as long as it took. For the first time in a long while, Marcus smiled fully, feeling the weight lift from his shoulders. He had faced darkness and come into the light. He had restored hope, rebuilt lives, and proven that courage and truth could overcome even the deepest corruption. The story of Marcus Reed would be remembered, not just for the battles he fought, but for the lives he saved, the justice he restored, and the hope he gave to a world that so desperately needed it. And with that thought, he turned away from the rooftop, ready to continue his journey, not just as a fighter for justice, but as a protector of the innocent, a guardian of truth, and a symbol of hope for all who had been wronged.